Om. 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 Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantiv Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarva Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarva Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. asato ma satkamayam tamaso ma jyotirgamayam mrityorma amritam gamayam aviravirma eti rudrayatte dakshinam mukham te namam pahi nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So today we begin chapter 8. In this text, the particular translation that we are reading, this chapter 8 is titled as Mahapurusha Yoga. But in different versions of the Gita, the titles are different. I think this is better known as Akshara Brahma Yoga. And also in some books, it's called Taraka Brahma Yoga. So there are 18 chapters in the Gita, and each chapter has some name, it's some yoga. And clearly, the division of the Gita into chapters was done later. It wasn't like when Krishna was giving the lesson to Arjuna. He said, okay, the first lesson is over, now we begin the next lesson. So the names were not given by Krishna. So we don't have to be too much worried about the different names or the names that kind of give us a general idea of what that text has. But beyond that, there is not much utility. The one thing which is helpful is that every chapter ends with the name, so every chapter is a yoga. And yoga really means is a method of connecting. Yoga, the literal meaning of the word is joining. And so yoga understood as a spiritual discipline means anything that connects the finite with the infinite, the jiva with the paramatma, the devotee with God. So any practice which brings the mortal and the immortal, the finite and the infinite together, that is yoga. So the insights and the practices given in each of these chapters will help us go closer to God, will help us realize our true nature. And that is why they are called yoga. So let's read the first two verses of this. Kim tad brahma kim adhyatmam kim karma purushottama adhibhutam cha kim proktam adhidaivam kimuchyate adhiyajñah katham kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayanakale cha katham neyosi niyatatmabhihi. Arjuna said, what is that Brahman? What is Adhyatma? And what is action, O best of men? What is called Adhibhuta? And what is said to be Adhidaiva? Who and how is the Adhiyajna in this body, O slayer of Madhu? And how are you known at the time of death by the self-restrained? So a series of questions. Now, all of these questions are based on the last two verses of the earlier chapter. So if you see the two verses, verse number 29 and 30 of chapter 7, these are the terms. Of course, when you read the translation, the terms are already translated. But in the original, these are exactly the terms that Krishna has used. Brahma, Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, Adhiyajna. So these are technical terms. Now in the translation, those terms have been already translated, as I said. But Krishna was not translating it, apparently. And so Arjuna hears this technical term. It's a little bit like when somebody's telling you something and they use some technical term. Then you say, well, wait a minute, what does that word mean? So exactly in the same way, Krishna has used all these terms in what he said just prior to this. And that is what Arjuna is asking. What is Brahma? What is Adhyatma? What is Adhibhuta? Because these were the terms Krishna had used in the earlier verses. So the first two verses of chapter 8 are Arjuna asking Krishna for the explanation of the terms he had used. And in the same order now, in the next three verses, Krishna will answer those questions. So let's read now verse number 3. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Aksharam Brahma Paramam
Aksharam Brahma Paramam
Svabhavodhyatma Muchyate
Svabhavodhyatma Muchyate
Bhuta Bhavodbhavakaro
Bhutavabhodbhavakaro
Visargav Karma Saudnitaha.
Visarga Karma Samudnata.
The blessed Lord said, the highest imperishable principle is Brahman. Its existence as the embodied soul is called Adhyatma, and the offering into the sacrificial fire, which causes the origin and development of beings, is called action. So three terms are described and explained in this. First is, go back to verse number 1. Krishna's first question was, what is that Brahman? And so Arjuna's question was, Krishna's reply here is, the highest imperishable principle is Brahman. So one simple way of defining Brahman is that it's imperishable. Akshara. Kshara means that which is perishable. Akshara means non-perishable. So the only non-perishable entity is Brahman. Other than that, everything is perishable. Although, as I mentioned some time back, the meaning of the term perishable, if you go to a post office, is different. They'll ask you, is it any hazardous perishable entities? And so don't bring up your Vedanta there because they mean differently by perishable. But from a Vedantic perspective, Brahman alone is imperishable. What do we mean by, obviously we know what perishing means. One way of understanding perishable is that which is form of destruction, that which goes back to its constituent forms. So if, for instance, now, if, oh, well, I better not touch any of these things. So any gadget or that you have, now when you say, well, it's perished, it's ruined, it's destroyed, if you just kind of go and just throw it somewhere, all its parts get separated. And then, well, it doesn't do its job anymore. So it's perished. Perished as an entity. The individual parts might remain, but they are no more working together and serving some purpose. That which has parts, any entity which has part, which is composed of parts, when those parts come apart, they say that entity is destroyed. So when something, and in order to hold those parts together, there is some force which is applied. Either there is a glue or you put nails or anything. And when the thing which held the particles together is removed, then they all go back to their original constituents and the thing perishes. So less the number of parts, moving parts, the longer will a thing remain. And this we kind of understand even in our day-to-day life, which is why now, for instance, solid-state drives are considered longer lasting. The failure of a regular hard drive, which has moving parts in it, well, a solid state doesn't have. And so, because there are fewer or no moving parts, it is said to last longer. But even that is perishable. It's a solid state drive is not Brahman. So the reason Brahman is non-perishable or imperishable is that Brahman has no parts. And because Brahman has no parts, there is nothing for it to come apart. And so that's one way of, at least from our physical perspective, to understand why Brahman is not perishable and why everything else is perishable. Everything else is made up of parts. Brahman has no parts. That's the important thing to remember. And Brahman has no parts because Brahman is not material. If something is made up of matter, then it will have parts. There is no, you just can't help it. It's going to have parts. So by Brahman, what is Brahman? Brahman is at highest imperishable entity. So whenever we use the term Brahman here in Vedanta, keep this at the back of the mind. When we say Brahman, we are not referring to any person. We are not referring to any place someone is residing in. We just refer to that one entity which is imperishable. You cannot speak of that entity as he or she, because that is beyond gender. Even to ascribe gender is to limit it. And therefore, it is beyond all language, beyond all expression. Next, Adhyatma. Its existence as the embodied soul is called Adhyatma. So the same Brahman, when becomes embodied, becomes identified with a limited entity. So the imperishable Brahman getting identified with a perishable entity such as the body, then is called Adhyatma. So Adhyatma is what we might say Jiva, the embodied soul. The offering into the sacrificial fire, this kind of sounds a bit complicated. The offering into the sacrificial fire, which causes the origin and development of beings, is called action or karma. Put in a more simple language, it means that anything that leads to birth and more action is karma. So when it says origin of beings, I mean, what is origin of beings? Beings coming into beings, born, so birth. So why is karma the cause of birth? Sometimes this question can come. Why are we here in this first place? Why were we, I mean, of course, everyone understands the physiological processes through which human beings are born. But why? We might know the how, but why did, I mean, okay, we got Big Bang and all of that, but why did it happen? What was the reason for the world to come? What was the reason for human beings to appear? What is the reason why we are born at all? And the answer is, you are born because of karma. To put simply, it's this, that every action produces a result, and in experiential terms, the results are either being used sukha or dukkha, joy or sorrow. Now, joy and sorrow, both, can be experienced only in a body. You cannot experience the joy or the sorrow unless you have a body and mind. Even in deep sleep state, when you're not even aware of your body and mind, there is no world, There are no objects in the world. There are no people in that deep sleep state. And you have no joy and sorrow coming from these things. And therefore, in order for us to experience sukha or dukkha, you need a body and mind. And acquiring a body and mind is what is the origin of beings, is what we call birth. So being born is to acquire a body. And once we acquire a body, then of course we do work and we experience the results of work. That is the development of being. So anything that leads to birth is karma. So three things were mentioned in this verse. The imperishable reality is Brahman. That same imperishable reality, when it becomes identified with a perishable body, becomes Adhyatma. And anything that leads to birth and rebirth, it's a circular motion. So it will go on and on and on. That is called karma. The next question of Arjuna was, what is Adhibhuta? Adhibhuta and Adhidaiva. The second part, if you see in verse number 1, what is called Adhibhuta and what is Adhidaiva? That is what Krishna now will describe in verse number 4. Let's chant the verse 4 together. Adhibhutam ksharo bhavaha
Adhibhutam ksharo bhava
purushashchadhidaivatam
purushashadaivatam
adhiyajño ahamevatra
adhyatno ahamevatra
dehe dehabhritam vara.
dehi dehapratam vara.
Perishable entities are called Adhibhuta. The cosmic being is called Adhidaiva. And I myself am called the Adhiyajna in this body, or best of embodied beings. Adhibhuta. If Brahman is the imperishable entity, then all perishable entities are called Adhibhuta. Now these are all technical terms, just accept them as the definition. Perishable entities in Sanskrit are called Adhibhuta. The cosmic being is called Adhidaiva. So what we generally the popular idea of God, whatever more or less people understand by God, is really what this Adhidaiva is. If you want a little bit more technical meaning, think about it this way. Now here is this body, is a material entity, is matter, but there is this consciousness who is identified with this body. And that's me, because I said, well, this is me. So just as this consciousness, which is identified with this little body, now if you look upon the entire universe, the material universe, as one big body, a cosmic body, so what is the consciousness identified with that cosmic body? So I have my little mind, but what is the mind behind this entire universe, the cosmic mind? And that cosmic mind is sometimes called by the term Hiranyagarbha. So a rather technical way of understanding this Adhidaiva would be that subtle cosmic being who is identified with the entire universe, as opposed to this subtle being who is identified only with this little body. So that is Adhidaiva. And in general terms, the protector, guide, creator, the God is the Adhidaiva. And Adhiyajna, I myself am called the Adhiyajna. Now here, as I have said, oftentimes when Krishna says I, he's not really referring to the historical Krishna. He's referring to I, the Atman. So this pure consciousness, which is indwelling, the Antaryami, one who dwells within and guides all the actions. Or what we popularly say, God dwelling in my heart. So the indwelling presence of the Spirit is called Adhyajna. So three things: all perishable entities, Adhibhuta, the cosmic being behind this universe is Adhidaiva, and the inner being, the inner controller, the Antaryami, is called Adhyajna. So three terms explained in this verse. Yeah.
How is the cosmic mind different than Brahman?
Why does it have to be? It doesn't. Brahman alone exists.
So,
Well, it's like this.
are they the same? Or?
Brahman alone exists, you see. It's as I said, depending on the context, the names might change. And I said, when the same person would go home, that person say to his children, that person is a dad. When that person is with his, say, wife, then same person becomes a husband. Then if you go to a ball game, then you become a fellow Red Sox fan or something. So again, the persons are not different, but it's the context. So Brahman alone is true. So when Brahman associated in and connected in some way has one name, the same Brahman as an indweller, inner controller will be Antaryami. So that's kind of a given in all Vedanta discussion. The reality is only one. All differences are because of these associations. Okay? And then the final question of Arjuna was, how are you known at the time of death by the self-restrained? And then Krishna answers that in verse number 5. Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayaha. He who at the time of death remembers me alone and passes out, leaving the body, attains my being. There is no doubt about this. And of course, this is one question that is asked, gets asked, and has been answered any number of times, and yet this question will never leave us. Because what happens after death is a mystery. There is no way to prove it, because those who die, they don't come back to tell us. So much of it will depend on faith, because there is no way to verify this. What Krishna says is this. Now, devotees of God would want to go to God. One way this idea gets described is that heaven is a place where the Lord resides. And after I die, I go to heaven and live with the Lord. That's one of the very popular ideas about what happens after death. What Krishna is pointing out here is that in order for us to attain to my being, and this will be explained and is open to discussion, attain to the being of God, if one person at the moment of death, the last thought is the thought of God. So whichever thought we hold on at the last moment, that determines the trajectory of that soul. So if that last moment, if I'm able to think of God, then I will, if I'm a devotee of God, if that's where I want to go, then my last thought before dying should be of God. And that seems like, oh, this is a wonderful thing. Why do I then have to even study the Gita? Why do I have to do all this meditation? I can just not bother about all these things. And when the last moment comes, Just think of God and that's it. Seems like a very easy way out. Except that if I have not trained myself to think of God, if I'm not able to hold my mind on God now, I will not be able to hold my mind on God when that last moment comes. The key term here actually is me alone, not just me, not just like, oh, let me think of everything. And then among the many things I think of, I can think a little bit about God. So me alone to the exclusion of anything else. That is what we try to do when we meditate. That even if I meditate 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day, can I hold on to thought of God and not think of anything else? And if I don't train myself to do that now, even if it's for 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, then what chance have I when that last moment comes that I'll be able to think of God? If, let's put it this way, I will naturally think of that which is most important to me. On the West Coast, for instance, where there are, in some places at least, there is a constant danger of fire, especially when the fire season, just like we have our blizzards and storms, there is sometimes what they call as a fire season. Certain Southern California, for instance, when there isn't enough rain and heat increases, and just either accidentally or some way fire starts, and we know hundreds and thousands of acres of land perishes, or the trees perish because of wildfires. And so many of the people there are almost trained, like if there is fire, you obviously can't take everything that belongs to you. So you can only take a few things. So what are the things you will take when there is no time? I mean, you have to leave the home immediately. And obviously, at such time, we are going to take the things that are most important to us, the things that we value most. And death is kind of a wildfire. I mean, this is one residence in which we are staying, and we have to leave this residence. And so we can only take what will be most important to us. And if God is most important to us, that's what we will be. That's what will be the uppermost part of our mind. Otherwise, there'll be 100 other things we'll be thinking of. Sri Ramakrishna says in one place that one man was on his deathbed, who just might die any moment. And so even when he's lying in death, this was the olden days, pre-electricity days, and so there's this oil lamp next to him, and then with a very feeble voice, he had barely any strength to speak. Then he calls somebody from the family nearby and says, try to make that wick a little smaller, because a lot of oil is getting burnt. A lot of oil will be wasted if you don't lower the wick a little bit. And he's about to die. So we see our priorities, we have to get our priorities straight. And we cannot wait till the last moment to get our priorities straight. That might be too late. And we have to then reorder our priorities right now when we can. Sometimes it's not, I mean, there is this debate, and sometimes this thought can come to our mind. What kind of, suppose we were given a choice of, you can die the kind of death you want. What kind of death would we like? Would we want an instantaneous death? Zoop, some bomb blast or something. Well, we just die even before we know we are dead. Or it's kind of a slow, excruciating, gradual deterioration. You go and so on. Some days when you are feeling a bit strong and in a good mood, try to think about this. What kind of a death, if you had a choice, would you prefer? The instantaneous death might seem like a good choice because then, well, you don't have to, there is no pain, there is no suffering, you just go. But there is no time to prepare either. You don't even know when it happens. But if it's a kind of a gradual march toward death, it might be painful, but at least then you have some time to prepare. You have some time to say, okay, time to now let go of many things. But of course, this is still an academic discussion because we don't have that choice. And so it makes sense to get our priorities straight when we can. Even with the feeble body, feeble mind, a lot of the things we can do correctly now, we won't be able to do then. So the sooner we get it straightened in our head, the better off we are. So that's what Krishna is saying. That he who at the time of death remembers me alone and passes out, leaving the body, attains my being. There is no doubt about this. This idea continues in the next two verses. So let's read them and then we'll be able to discuss a little bit more. Verse number 6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Thinking of whatever object at the time of death a person leaves the body, he attains, O son of Kunti, that very object, being constantly absorbed in its thought. So it's not just that if you die thinking of God, you will attain to God. You will attain to whatever it is that you have been thinking of at the time of death. If you love elephants, for instance, and if that's all that you like to think of every now and then, and in my last moment I'm just thinking of elephants, chances are I might be an elephant keeper or be an elephant myself. So whatever we think of, that's what we become. And there is a wonderful story told about this. So he was this great rishi, a great sage, a very earnest seeker of God. And he was living in a deep forest and spending his time in study and meditation. And he was a highly advanced soul, almost on the way to illumination. Then one day, when he's sitting in his hermitage meditating, suddenly a little a deer, baby deer, came running. It was being chased by some wild beast, and it had gotten separated from its mother, and they just came running there. And immediately he took that deer inside and protected that deer from danger. And he fed that deer. And of course, then the deer continued to stay at his place. And he took good care of it, and this became a part of his dwelling. After a few years, he had already become old and he was about to die. And then this deer who had gotten so much attached to this sage just came and sat near his bed. And he was just looking at that deer and he was just thinking, who will take care of you in this deep forest with so many wild animals? I took care of you as long as I could. Now I'm about to die. What will happen to you? So he kept on thinking about the deer. So the last, according to this verse, the last thought in his mind was of a deer. And then we read, he was reborn as a deer. That's what he was been thinking. But because he was an advanced soul, because his mind had acquired these strong spiritual samskaras, that deer was a little different than other deers. Sometimes you will see, sometimes some people have reported that say, oh, my dog is very spiritual or my cat is very spiritual. There is again no way to verify one way or the other, but sometimes you do see some characteristics in these animals which makes you feel that they are not just animals. There is something going on there. In any case, so this sage was reborn as a deer, found a place and started staying in an ashram where there were other deers, and always would be in a very meditative mood, but still a deer. And that as a deer, because he was an advanced soul, he remembered his past birth. He remembered that I was going to have moksha. I would have been free. My blunder was at last moment I was thinking of the deer and I was reborn as a deer. So he was very careful about what he was thinking, even as a deer. And so we read that after that deer's body was, that karma to be worked out through the deer body was over, he was reborn, and he was reborn as a human being again. And his name was Bharata. Not the same Bharata with Ramayana. This is the same name. And he decided, I'm not going to speak. Because the moment you speak, it's like this. The moment you strike up a conversation, then there are more words. And then that's how relationships are built. That's how attachments come and people get caught up in this world. So he thought, I'm just going to be dumb. I'm just going to be not speak at all. So there won't be any connection. There won't be any attachment. And everybody leave me alone. Because, well, what can you do? If there's a person deaf and dumb, what else can you do from such a person? And that was at least the older idea. Today, of course, we know that physical handicap, there are ways of overcoming it. There are ways of making them productive parts of society. But we are talking about centuries ago. And so he thought the best way for me not to get attached to this world is to just act as if I'm deaf, as if I'm dumb. And so that's what then everyone left him alone. He was called Jada Bharata. Jada means, oh, he's no good. He's just a stupid Bharata. And so he was highly enlightened, but he never let anyone knew that he's enlightened. He said, okay, if you see, this is another one lesson that we can learn. If someone were to call any of us stupid, we're going to get upset. And sometimes you might think, why should I be upset? Do I really become stupid just because someone calls me stupid? Because we are what we are. If someone calls me a genius, we feel happy, but someone calling me a genius doesn't make me a genius. Or someone call me a stupid doesn't make me stupid. I am who I am. And so it's good to remember this so that we learn to remain unaffected by whatever the world will say. The way to remain unaffected by praise or blame. Praise is what everyone wants. It's very sweet. No one says, don't praise me. It's only when criticisms come or abuse comes that we get upset. But if praise makes us happy, then blame is going to make us unhappy. And the goal is, can I remain unaffected by both praise and blame? In any case, Jada Bharata didn't care when people just called him stupid. He just remained who he is. And then we read in his story that there was one day a king passing by that road, and king used to go in these palanquins, and 4 people carrying the king. And it so happened that one of the persons fell sick, and they needed one strong man. And so the stupid Bharata they found sitting by the roadside. They said, "Hey, come here, and come on, carry this." And so he wouldn't speak, so he just got up and then he was carrying. Okay. Then they found that the movement of that palanquin wasn't smooth. It was kind of. And they said, "Why isn't this person walking properly?" And they found that there were some ants and some things on the way, and he was trying to avoid them. That's why he wasn't walking straight. And then the king said, "So walk properly. What does it matter if a few ants die when you're walking?" And that was the first time this Bharata stops and then speaks. And then he gives that teaching is available when he says, then he shows that how the same reality, the same Brahman is there in these ants as in everybody. And then everybody realizes, well, he is not really as stupid as we thought he was. In any case, so he had taken special care to not get attached. And by that training, that care, then he dies and then he's enlightened. So he just at that, as a Bharata, then the end moment comes, he's able to think of God alone. So this is a story that we find in history and mythology, which highlights this idea that whatever is the last thought that I have, that will determine my future. And let's read verse 7, which concludes this idea, and then we'll stop. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu Mamanusmara yudhya cha Mayyar pitamano buddhihi Mame vaishyasya samshayaha. Therefore, remember me at all times and fight. With your mind and intellect devoted to me, you shall attain me alone. There is no doubt about this. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Remember me at all times. Now, the important phrase here is at all times. We do remember God. Most people remember God when there is a problem. We don't remember God so much when there is no problem. When everything is great, in fact, thinking of God itself becomes a problem, really, in some ways. When everything is, it's like this. Just try it. Well, don't try it out, but you can at least imagine. Say you're having some big party at home and everyone's having fun, and that time you say, "Come on, let's sit down and read a little bit of the Gita and see what everyone says." Say, "No, not now. This is not the time to do it." So God can be a problem when you're having a great time. But when there is a difficulty, when there is a problem, there is a crisis, then that's the time we want to think of God. Now, what first of all Krishna is saying is think of God at all times. When things are good, when things are not good, think of God. Now, thinking of God all the time is not easy. Well, let me put it this way. Thinking of anything all the time is not easy. The reason is our mind hasn't acquired the capacity to hold on to one thought, even if it is not the thought of God. I mean, even if you're a great baseball fan, still it's not possible for you to think of baseball all 24 hours a day. So first of all is the inability to hold on to one thought. And if we can hold on to one thought, then that thought should be of God. And in order to acquire that ability to hold on to one idea, one thought, which is really what our japa and meditation are, it's a training to hold on to one form, the form of the Ishta, form of the chosen ideal. It's a training to hold on to one sound, the sound of the mantra. So japa is a training to hold on to one thing and reduce the fickleness of the mind. And that can occur only when the heart becomes pure. And the heart will become pure when I'm able to work in a selfless way. I can carry out my duties without any selfish interest. And that is what he means by fight. Now, Krishna is not advocating that everyone just go and fight. Here the word fight means do your duty. Because right now, this conversation occurs on the battlefield. Right now, Arjuna's duty is to fight. So he's just saying, do your duty. And it just so happens that at this moment, Arjuna's duty is to fight. So if I can do my duty in a selfless way, then it will purify my heart. If it purifies my heart, I'll be able to think of God all the time. If I'm able to think of God all the time, I'll be able to think of God at the time of death. If I think of God at the moment of death, it is to God that I will go. That's how this chain works. Okay, so do you have any thoughts, ideas, questions about what things we have studied today? Yeah, yes, sir.
Swami, how about if it's your second last thought?
Now,
Does that?
well, you'll be like Bharata.
A little closer, maybe.
Yeah.
The last thought might be ouch.
Yeah. Actually, it is said that, and that will come later on in the Gita, it's called Antya Vijnana, the last knowledge that we have before dying. And it is said that the last thing we know is what next body we are going to take. Where are we going? We know that. But there is no way you can tell this to anybody, because then that wouldn't be the last thing you do. And so it is said that it's like this. When we leave this body, we don't become bodiless. What is that? What is the thing which sucks blood? It's called the leech. A leech, yes. Now, a leech, if you've seen a movement of leech, it only if it catches on to the next one, then it leaves the. If it goes on to it catches the next one, then it leaves the former support. So the soul is like that. So it's not that, oh, this person has left the body and is like suspended somewhere. Actually, you've already kind of held on to the next body, and then you leave this body. And so you know where you're going, except that you can't tell anybody. Anything else? The goal, according to Vedanta, is not to go anywhere. Because going and coming is possible only when we are limited. When we become infinite, we can't go anywhere. It sounds paradoxical. If I'm everywhere, I can't go anywhere. It's like this. Now, this particular room in which we are all sitting. Now, in this room, I can go from one place to another place because I'm smaller than the room. The room is big, I'm small, which is why I can go from here to there. Now, let's say I become big enough to fill this whole room. Now, if I've filled the whole room, I cannot go anywhere. So now, what then realized soul becomes is that realized soul is not limited to any body. The realized soul knows I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. So all of these limiting entities are gone. So the enlightened being is everywhere, and because the enlightened being is everywhere, the enlightened being doesn't go anywhere. So no going, no coming. One of the ways of describing, one of the epithets that's applied to Buddha is called Tathagata. Tathagata, one of the ways of understanding is that no coming, no going, or thus coming, thus going. In other words, you are beyond going and coming. So going and coming, being reborn, going to heaven or hell or this world or that world or anywhere, It's possible only for those who have remained small. As long as we are ignorant, we remain small, identified with some body somewhere. When we get knowledge, no body can limit us. We are everywhere. We don't go anywhere. So the goal really is not to go anywhere. But if we do go somewhere, we know where we are going.
Maharaj, in the terms that Arjuna was asking about, there seems to be a prefix adi in front of all of them. Does that have any particular meaning? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, depending on the context, sometimes it changes. Yeah, so there isn't one fixed meaning for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I just remark. I just keep on my own thought. It's if I develop mind as vast as ocean, it means it's mind of love, right? So I need to develop a quality of love in me to have this mind, and no other way. So it means it's like Buddha taught, yes, people. And this Bharata, Jada Bharata personality, probably he was, I guess, very loving person. And so probably he was able to work out his quality of love as attachment. Probably, so I just, in this story, I thought I would keep ideas, so he was very loving, and he somehow was able to work out this quality of love. Otherwise, he won't be able to be enlightened. Mm-hmm. So it's just a one way to follow the story, like narrative, right? The other way, I understand it, it's without quality of life, no way.
Right, so the idea is also that learning from Jada Bharata's story, we can see that we need to reflect in our own lives also. Because this is not, for none of us, this is not our first birth. We have been born millions of times before. And unless we want to get out of the circle, we can be born millions of times again. So there is no one is forcing us not to be born again. It's really our choice of how long. It's like when you go, when you go to say Disney World or some theme park or somewhere. How long to sit in that circle or that merry-go-round? That's our choice. You sit as long as you want. When you're tired, it's good for you to know when you're tired, you can get out. You're not stuck there. And as long as the merry-go-round is a merry-go-round, why leave? Well, it's merry, right? So only when that merry-go-round becomes a sorrow-go-round, then it's no fun. So that's what viveka or discernment means. So we look at our own life's experiences in life, and then we have to determine, am I on a merry-go-round? Some of us might say, well, it's not exactly a merry-go-round, it's merry and sorrow-go-round. And it's that merry part of us, merry part of it, which says, okay, let me just bear with the sorrow because I don't want to let go of the merry. Then we look a little bit more deeply. And then we might discover that what I see a merry may not be really merry at all. And that's how the whole reflection goes. Akash.
So implicit in that statement then is that there's a certain amount of sorrow and disillusionment that is a prerequisite to higher seeking of spiritual. So somebody is content, they may not have the urge to, get off that merry-go-round, if there's that.
Yeah,
so it's a bit of a paradox of content. The ideal is to be contented, but if you're discontented, it's actually a good thing because you're
Right, but
you're seeking.
it's it's also the statement of truth or a statement of reality is that while there are contented people in the world, there isn't anyone who is completely contented. That I might be saying, oh, I'm very happy, but I have this little bit of problem, but that's not a big deal. I'm still contented. So, I mean, there is little bit something there. And as long as that something which is there, I cannot experience that total fulfillment. So that's the idea. So contentment, and again, as I said, if one feels contentment, one doesn't have to get out of the circle. So it's only when, also one other thing, sorrow itself is not enough. I mean, it's not like all the people who don't think about moksha or anything are all contented people. I mean, there are a lot of people, they're extreme suffering. But they are not thinking of God as a way to get over that suffering. So it's not enough just to suffer. That's if that suffering generates some amount of reflection in me. Because I mean, no one wants to suffer. We all want to get over suffering. But not all of us have the same idea about what will remove that suffering. So some people might try to find a worldly way, a worldly solution to the problem of suffering. And so long as that solution, they are satisfied with it or they keep on trying for it, they don't have to think about God. At some point, the soul will realize that no, none of these things will help me remove this. That's one thing. Second thing also is when I'm using the word suffering, I'm using it in a little bit more deeper sense. I mean, there is suffering associated with homelessness, hunger, and so on. That's clearly suffering. But there is another kind of suffering which most people are not even become aware of, and that is that suffering associated with our existence as human beings. The death, for instance, the problem of aging, the problem of sickness. Now, no one is exempt from it. We keep on hoping that everything should be fine, but sooner or later, these things are going to come upon us. And then, of course, at the intellectual level, the limitation of the intellect, there is only how much can we really know. So the mind is limited, the intellect is limited, the mind has its ups and downs, there is stress, anxiety, fear, worry. And we can close our eyes to it and still think like, oh, everything is fine, but everything is not fine. So when I say about suffering, I'm thinking about this existential suffering. And most of us are so busy dealing with this superficial suffering of, oh, someone was very nasty to me and blah, blah, blah. So there is no time or the leisure to even think about this deeper suffering. And that deeper suffering cannot come through a worldly, the overcoming that deeper suffering. So when I say discontented, it's not just contentment with the day-to-day life, it's contentment with life itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, I think we'll stop today and then we can continue this discussion next week. When we meet next week, we'll start on verse number 8. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. So we'll have the satsang then on Sunday, if there is no another storm. next on this thing at 11 o'clock. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Huh?
Another puja?
Yes, it will be Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. Yes. Yes, I'm so, that's my mistake. Mea kalpa. Yes, on Sunday we'll have Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, and the puja will begin at 10:30, as usual, with special worship, flower offering, uh, music, and flower of, what did I say? And prasad distribution, of course. So that will be on Sunday. And next Wednesday, we will continue this discussion. On Saturday, we will not have Arati and meditation because of a preparation for the puja. And that's it. And then pray to that Adi Daiva so that we have less of snow. This thing. Aren't you tired of snow?
It's Brahman. Snow is Brahman.
In Brahman, so long as you don't have to go out and shovel. Someone said, so long as you don't have to, when you have to go out and shovel in this thing, then all the poetry from the snow goes away. As long as you're sitting in your window and watching the calm, beautiful snow, then it's great.
All the machines come out and
Yeah. Okay, so let's conclude with the prayer on page 3 of your books. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.